Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 41 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we go through our Auog breeding plan, as well as start growing Ralesias. Enjoy! Okay, well, we've got some old builds to remove, and in doing so, we can reassign the caravans to go where they need to. So we just go here on any outpost we're going to remove, find any caravans that go there, open them up, and change the destination. And off he goes. And I guess it's important to mention that I have slowly been adding names to the caravans, so when you're in the caravan manager, you can actually tell what they're doing. But it's actually more useful than that. First, if you want to change a name, you can just go in there and type what you want. Or if you're at the caravan, you can do the same thing, but it will actually let you put an icon in there if you want to. Which you could. I didn't do it because I wanted to type the name down anyway. It is a little annoying that you have to go to the creature to put the icon in. For example, if we come here, there is no way of adding it. So there it is. And if we come back to our codex, that does make it a little easier to figure out what it is. However, it does block some of the name. So the reason why the icons are of limited use is because there's actually a secret function to this window. It has a search bar right here. So that is why you want names. You can create a naming system and then find anything. So the way my system works is it's a three-part name. The first part of the name is the build that the caravan services. The second part of the name is what the item is, or if it's a multi-stop. So for example, with this one, it's the concrete build and it moves steel. And the third thing is simply whether it's a pickup or delivery. And I typed it in order of importance, so I think knowing that it goes to concrete is more important than what its cargo is. It might seem weird to say pick up or deliver when obviously a caravan has to do both, but I'm using it to sort between picking up byproducts and picking up main products. So if it's a byproduct that is produced inconsistently, it is considered a pickup. So in other words, the caravan is waiting at the depot to fill up and it takes however long it takes. However, a delivery is where the caravan goes somewhere, and speaking of the pickup there, he's full. But a delivery is where it goes to a outpost that is always full. So for example, let's search some things. How about the CDNA build? So we just type it in, and these are all of the caravans that go to CDNA. So if we wanted to look for one, that would make it a lot easier. What about any caravan that is moving logs? There we go. Although it is going to pick up some other things, such as this isn't actually moving logs, it's moving ash, but it's supporting the log build. So of course it's going to come up, but that gives you the information that you need. And how about we do pickup? This shows all of the caravans that are picking up byproducts and waiting until they're full to take them to where they need to. And if a caravan is a multi-item caravan, there's two different ways that I sorted them. The first is a multi-stop caravan. And this is a caravan that does not use the caravan spreadsheet. It's just picking up byproducts, and whenever it's full, and it stops at every place that it needs to get rid of its junk. Whereas if we search for calc, these are all of the caravans that were set by the calculator and have very exact pickup and deliveries. So yeah, it's really cool and really useful. And when you're looking at this stuff, it can be a bunch of just information, but nonetheless, having the icons might help. So let's come in here and remove the description of the item altogether. And if we search for it, the icon will actually come up. So there's different ways of doing it, whatever works for you. This is a work in progress for me. I'm not exactly sure how I want to keep things sorted. This is how it's worked so far. But it becomes more and more necessary that you do that the more and more caravans you end up with, because it gets out of control pretty quick. It'll be very satisfying to remove all these buildings. It always is. Creates a lot of junk though. Specifically when it comes to junk, all of these produce something from nothing machines like sap and limestone and soil. They all produce entire stacks of items. So once they go idle, there's a lot of junk stuck inside of them. Wonder how the latex has been going? Well, the caravan almost has 2,000 of it now, so I would say it's going pretty fast. So the biomass drop-offs made it, So we can just hook that up and it will get priority over these other machines. And actually, look at that. We're almost done processing all the biomass away. Awesome. That was fast. I mean, that was the point, so I'm glad it worked. Everything cleared out and we have more space as required for other processes. Power output is nice and consistent. Making rocks and butchering them really doesn't require that much electricity, so that makes sense. And the stone buffer is doing great. It would be nice to see this warehouse full of rubber again, but the factory has a big buffer, so it's probably going to take a while. Now that we have cDNA, what is the next step here? Well, our goal is to make our next creature, the Auog, but first we're going to need to research the Ralesia. And this is another flower like the moondrop, so it has a fairly similar life cycle, where first we have the plantation, which requires a bunch of stuff, but now 300 soil and 50 treated wood. So that is a lot of soil. You definitely don't want to be handcrafting those. And the Ralesia codec, which is similar to the other ones, and also flower DNA samples. I believe this is our second stage sample. So what happens is first you make the generic Earth DNA samples, and then add a bunch of science packs to those, and then it will turn into the flower DNA samples. So we take that and a planter box, our cDNA, and also some biosamples, and we'll be able to make some Ralesias from nothing in a nursery. And then the natural life cycle will turn 8 seeds into 10 Ralesias. And also you need to add soil, water, and hydrogen. And then you take the flower and process it back into the seeds. So 5 flowers becomes 8 seeds. And it goes back and forth, kind of like how moondrops work. So we'll research that, and we might as well keep going, because when we calculate how much of them we're going to need, it's going to kind of depend on what we're using it on. And the Augs are more complicated than the Vrox are, so let's go through all these things. We have the Auog paddock, and again, it's another huge soil building at 300 soil, and also annoyingly bolts. That isn't something that you really need. I think it only goes into the small parts, but yay, now you need them for the paddocks. And they have their own codecs. It's a lot cheaper when it comes to circuit boards, but the general components are the same. And you also have bare DNA samples, which, like the flower samples, come from the generic Earth DNA samples and a bunch of Auog codexes. And we have a new food type, Auog food. This is a little more edible than the rock food, where it gets flora, Ralesias, moss, seaweed, plastic for the bag, and steam to cook it. So we'll have to plan that build out, but luckily there's no spoilables in there, it's just various plant matter. So that'll be a lot easier. Now let's talk about the Auog life cycle. First, we're going to need to make some from nothing. That requires, of course, cDNA and biosamples, as well as the bare and genetic Earth DNA samples. And then we have our tier 1 and tier 2 life cycles, so we can choose the one we want. And the Augs, instead of being cocoons, you have Auog pups. The easier recipe is 20 flora and 10 moss, gives you 2 to 5 Auog pups, which is actually a pretty huge variance in 15 seconds. And the second recipe adds 3 Auog food. It takes the same amount of time, and instead of 2 to 5, you get 4 to 8. So it almost doubles output, which to me seems pretty good. But of course, we will calculate it out to make sure that it's actually good. And then those Auog pups need to grow into adults, and we have a recipe that involves flora and moss, or flora, food, sap, and moss. With the first recipe, 4 pups go in and 2 to 4 come out, and the second one, 8 go in and 3 to 8 come out. But the growth time decreases from 160 to 130, so of course it's faster. And then what do you do with your adults? There's a caging and uncaging recipe, and if you want to render them, you can. And we're going to look at that. It gives us a lot of stuff we're familiar with, but also some new things. We get lard and blood. And we'll calculate all this stuff later, but do note that you get a lot of meat out of the Augs. And you're going to find that different creatures are good for different types of creature parts. Just depends on what you want. And we actually have a third thing that they can do. And ultimately, this is what we're growing them for, because we need poop, a lot of poop, where you put in flora and moss and you get 3 to 8 manure. And if you add the Auog food, you now get 5 to 12 and the crafting time goes down. And it's interesting that manure is actually a decay item. 5 hours and 30 minutes is a long time, but nonetheless it does decay eventually, and it decays into clay. So we're going to want to calculate all of that, but we can take it one step further to domestication, stage 1. And what this essentially does is allow you to use your Augs to generate electricity. And we use the Auog powered generator to do that, which requires an Auog and a bunch of stuff. Use raw muscle power to pump out some electricity, clean energy, but the animal may need to rest. I don't think it's a may, it's going to need to rest. And it's 22 megawatts for one building, so it's actually a huge source of power at this stage of the factory. And then we have the Pyfoon Bay, a creature resort for rest, relaxation, and feeding. And if you look at the bottom of the tooltip here, it says consumes Augs, and it consumes them at 22 megawatts. And if you look at the bottom of the tooltip here for the Auog, you can see that they actually have a fuel value of 500 megajoules. And after it is consumed, you get a tired Auog. What do you do with a tired Auog? Well, you have a choice. You can, of course, chop them up into animal bits. And what's interesting about this is because they are tired, they can't fight back, so you don't need to put them in a cage. You can just chop them up. But you get a reduced output of items. The big difference is they have no lard, but also you get half of the amount of meat and half of the amount of blood. So if you're chopping them up for something besides those, then you can actually work them to the bone first before you chop them up and get free electricity. However, if you are chopping them up for things like meat or lard, then you really don't want to be turning them into tired Augs first, because you get less from it. Also, you have the option of regenerating them back to their normal state if you would rather reuse them. And you have two choices here. You can use Auog food and moss and give them 5 seconds, and that will regenerate it to go back through the chain. Or instead of the Auog food, you can put in 10 meat and give them 15 seconds, and then it will regenerate. And these two recipes, whether they're good or not, kind of depends. I would say if you're using them as an actual power plant, then you probably want Auog food. However, if you find yourself with a bunch of extra meat and you just want to get rid of it, then having Augs work and then regenerate by eating the meat is probably one of the more efficient methods of using it right now. So yeah, we've got some options. For now though, we need to make these Ralesia flowers and then plan a build with the Augs. We have the cDNA here, but also note that we have lots of other potential inputs, and we don't know what creatures would require what in the future, but they all are already here, which means that we can just use them and start making creatures, and it will all already be on a belt and nice and convenient. Because we want to try to have something that's semi-permanent now, where we don't have to keep building something every time we have a new creature, that instead we just need to change the recipes around and maybe move a belt or two, and we'll just be able to make the new creatures. And here's our old build, making Caravans and the Digosauruses. I just left it here to remind myself that it essentially existed. But we do need to replace this, so let's do that. It's probably going to trash the inventory, but that's what happens. And that's one of our last burner assemblers that we're getting rid of. There's still a few scattered around the factory, but not many. We're probably not going to need to worry about Digosauruses for quite some time. So for now, we can just do our 2 caravan types. And we don't really know what items each one would use, so we can just kind of hook them up to every belt and let them have access to what they can get, and then we can figure out from the remainder what's left. And there it goes, automatically making our Caravans. Oh wow, look at that. Flora actually appeared on our list, down to 39.2%. And yeah, it is getting a little slow, but as long as it's fast enough, then it's fine. Now that we have research done, we have a bit of a calculation to do. We need to figure out which Auog recipe we want. And here's the 2 recipes. It is extremely interesting that both of them normalize to exactly the same energy cost. That said, the tier 2 recipe does require a little bit of steam, but the big takeaway here is you're reducing the raw amount of native flora and moss. Flora goes from 14 to 10 and moss goes from 7 to 6. With the addition of things like sap, Ralesia, and seaweed. Most of this is pretty low. Really, the Ralesia is the only thing worthwhile here. So you may or may not want to do this Auog recipe, but nonetheless, that's a pretty big reduction of flora, and that'll just allow us to get more on one belt. Like, flora is easy to make, yes, but we only have so many belts in the factory. So I don't see this tier 2 recipe as strictly bad, especially when you look at the number of buildings. So we would need 6 reproductive complexes and 27 paddocks for the first tier, and it goes down to 4 reproductive complexes and 12. So the reproductive complexes go down by a little bit, but it's less than half for the Auog paddocks. So now that we know that, let's figure out how big to make it. And we might as well make the Auog food while we're here, just to see what the total numbers are. And looking at it as it is, if we just did the 4 reproductive complexes, we would get 1.11. However, where this complex is and where the Auog food is probably going to be in different places. But we can't really double this recipe because then that would require more than 1 belt's worth of flora. So that seems to be pretty reasonable. So we know how much food we want. Let's do a new build here and make sure we choose the right amount of food. We don't want a mistake like we did with rock food. So we need a minimum of 1.4. What's interesting about Auog food is it actually has some other uses. So if we look at caravans here, they will eat Auog food. And we get 4 actions out of it, which is way better than the 1 action we're getting from jerky. So we're definitely going to want to make more of this than is minimally required for this build. But it doesn't have to be that much more. But nonetheless, we may decide to make more Augs in the future, and having more Auog food might be appreciated. So we want to think, how big can we make this? Well, it requires seaweed and moss, which is already available where rock food is. And you know what? 3 per second actually seems pretty good. That will allow us to double Augs in the future if we want to, and it will leave some left over for the caravans. Of course, we could calculate for seaweed and stuff, but because we made so many seaweed facilities right here, we should probably just pull off of that and not even worry about it. And the moss will be there too. So really, the only thing we actually need to worry about are the Ralesias. So yet again, following it down the chain, one more build here. Making sure to put the modules in, and they consume their own seeds. The matrix solver I don't think is going to work because it's a 0 here, so we have to type at least some number in. Let's just do 1, and it has the star there showing we did type something. So then, if we do that, the matrix solver now works correctly. So minimally we're going to need 5, and that's interesting because that's exactly 1 belt of soil. Looking at the ratio here, we're actually making 10 Ralesias, but only 5 of them come out the other side, because we had to make seeds to make more. And I'm sure that level of hydrogen is going to be fine with all of the electrolyzing we're doing. So would this be fine, or would we want to go bigger? So looking at the flowers themselves, they don't go into a bunch of stuff that's relevant right now. However, we turn them into seeds, and I just see the description here. These seeds can explode themselves. Seems dangerous. But if we look at the seeds, well, those seeds go into things. They are used as a food for a lot of different creatures, including cotton guts, which we are about to make, and also the powdered Ralesia seeds, which goes into making starch, and then that starch goes into mainly a bunch of food. So Ralesias are the kind of thing we're going to want more than a minimum amount of, and I'm actually thinking it's going to be a full belt item. Well, we're noticing a pattern here, where for every 5 Ralesias that we want, we're going to need a full belt of soil, and that's the speed of our belt, so we could potentially build 3 of these, or maybe just 1 and expand them. But now we have our new flower we're going to make, so we need to automate what we can. And we're not going to be making enough of these that I think we need to have permanent enclosures. So instead, I think we can just have this 1 data array up here, and then just change the recipe as we need. And we're going to need some planter boxes for the nursery, but also we should calculate how many of these flowers we want. So as far as modules, one of these builds is going to be 1,500 of them. So we kind of want to have a lot, especially considering we need to turn them into seeds first before we're even going to get anything out of it. So we're going to want quite a few. Also, we're going to need the codexes, which we might as well make here too, because pretty much every build is going to require them. And we can just change that recipe around as well, because if you start looking at these codexes, they all basically require the same 4 ingredients. Lamps, circuit boards, glass, and tin cable. More biosamples, more cDNA. That's kind of what you do, just keep extending this as required. and then see what you don't have and go from there. Okay, all our items got here. Don't really care about inserters or anything. We'll just throw them all in. Takes a bunch of items and it will craft very quickly, but this machine is way faster than it needs to be, so we don't really care. We picked up a bunch of planter boxes from our science, so we throw that in there. And then once the flower DNA sample is done, it's just going to start running. And it will make as many flowers as we put planter boxes in. And in the future, at least when it comes to flowers, if we have a different flower type, we would just change these recipes out, and hopefully we would have most of the things that we need here in order to do it. So now we have a semi-permanent way of making new things. Oh, there it is. We've got our first flower. Okay, we just need the spare parts in here, and this machine should start up, and then we'll see what we're slow on. We have a lot of inserters on here, and we want to try to maximize it. So glass and spare parts. Let's do something weird and just have it do a little U shape there just to try to max it out. It seems to be doing pretty good. Just trying to get this thing going as fast as we reasonably can, because we need a lot of them. You can see how they are very quickly ramping you up into putting things on some kind of bus, or at least automating making them. Because in the time of setting up this machine, we've got 13 buildings, so we'll grab them. But that would be so terrible to try to build this by hand. It's just so much junk in your inventory. Okay then, we've got a build here to do. We want to try to make this as repeatable as possible, because we are very likely to make 3 of them. We might have to wait until we have enough plantations to do it, but the goal would probably be to make 3. And where do we want to do this? You know what, let's just put it on the other side of this lake and see what it looks like. It'll be something like that. Just keep repeating it. Put a bunch in here. And what do we have? 144. So we don't need those 2 on the end. And is that a good shape? We need radars out here. Yeah, probably. That said, if we made it longer, it would fill in the available space better and be less likely to bump into other things. I don't think there's any bus lines or anything that would actually come out here, so this would work. Okay, we really need radars. I need to plan. Can't do that without the radars. Okay then. So doing this allows us to get rid of 1 line of them. And then we don't need all of those. Sure, that's a pretty good shape. Okay, that took a little while. Again, but everything's set up. All the belts are coming in on the bottom because the area at the top we kind of need for bus lines. First, let's handle the seeds. Something like this. So we want 6 of them, and I'm trying to make this as narrow as possible so we'll have maximum space if we want to tile this in the future. And the output can keep going. That will be the Ralesias that we can use for other things. Also, we probably want to kind of block these off a little bit so we can double the output as we get more and more flowers in the system. And the other bit is just the 1 belt of soil, and that'll go around. So I think we're basically ready to test this. So we should probably shut down all of this processing here, and the way we can do that is to turn off this recipe. We'll let it finish up with whatever it's printing, but we've got 42 Ralesias. In goes the water. Does it make it to every machine? Sure seems like it. And now we need the soil, but there's a ton that needs to go in buffer, so it's going to take a second for this to all fill up. So it all goes on this belt and does a side switch. Oop, that one doesn't have a recipe. And we're pumping the hydrogen in. So in goes the dirt. It'll get placed onto the side here, and we've got belts strategically removed to limit how many of these are going at the same time. So first, 12 in there, 12 in there, and we've got 18 of them left. So in they go. We might need to further disconnect some of these machines. Let's see how they work with just these, and there it goes. It's a pretty simple building, but it's also a contained hydrogen atmosphere, so not much to see on the outside. Well, since this machine is just sitting here doing nothing, we might as well pull the flowers out and get rid of that inserter for now. Basically, we want to let this run until there is a backup of seeds, and then we'll put more flowers in. And we have a backup of seeds here, which means the next batch of flowers will go into the plantations. Once it gets going, we won't have to micromanage it quite as much. but there it goes. Okay, backing up on seeds again so we can hook up that side. And then we hook this up to double the output. More flowers and another doubling. Backing up on seeds again, which means more flowers. It's the repeating cycle of backing up on seeds, pick up flowers, put the flowers in, fall behind on seeds, but it's just about at the point where we can just let it go and the belt will fill up reasonably quickly. It's just if we didn't do this, it would take forever because it would have a huge buffer. But we're getting pretty close to exponential growth on this thing now. Now we're at the point of mostly maxing out this botanical nursery here, which means we probably can just let the belt fill up now. So we double once again. Might as well hook up the second one so we fill up on seeds that much faster. It's all on the same belt, at least on this part, so there's no extra buffer involved with hooking this up. And there we go, backing up on flowers organically, which means we can just manually pick them up rather than having to do crazy belt stuff. And now we have another doubling. And aluminum is getting really low. We're basically down to 1 mine now. So we should probably do something about that. Basically, we just pick the miner up and put him back down in such a way where now we've got 4 miners on that patch. A tiny little square right there, which I imagine is going to drain this patch in about 30 minutes or so. Our coal patch is just barely holding on, like it's very close to the limit there. I walk away for like a second and look at all the flowers we've got now. And there we are, doubling again. We'll fill up this entire line. Let's hook up this next one just to fill up this belt with seeds as quickly as possible. And it looks like the entire line is filling up on seeds, which means collect more flowers and fill up the second line. And now we might as well hook up every seed machine to get it filled up as quickly as possible. And then once we have a backup of seeds, we can hook up the second line. Okay, that's a pretty good backup. So there go the seeds, doubling the output yet again. I guess while we're waiting for this to back up again, we should probably just set up that second aluminum mine because this one is going to be drained very quickly. Okay, this is more than enough, so at least the buildings are ready for when the patch runs dry. Just didn't want to completely run out of aluminum and then not be able to make more miners. And oh yeah, backing up on flowers. And there we go, that was fast. That exponential growth is really something. Now the last bit gets hooked up, and in it goes. The build isn't completely seeded yet. We've got some in the back end that need to fill up, but it seems to be pretty smooth. There's nothing real crazy going on. It's just growing Ralesias. Since we're starting to back up now, we can send them forward. First do a balancer because it's pulling off of mostly the left side, so they get to this belt right here and then get merged on. I'm expecting there to be 2 more of these, just kind of pending on having all of the plantations built because they do take a long time, and also pending need of them because that did take a long time to handcraft and we're not that far away from robots, so I would rather not build a second or a third one unless we actually need the output. But nonetheless, we'll want to try to remember to leave this space open so we can build 2 more. And it might go over the uranium a little bit, but otherwise it won't interact with anything. And I built a nice landfill bridge here to keep the belt nice and straight. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to use our new Ralesias to start making Auog food, and then use that food to start breeding Augs. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.